Hi, and welcome to BTS Podcast. I am super excited to launch BTS Podcast with Karen Okonkwo. A little bit about BTS. I'm Lynae Cook. I'm your host. I'm super excited to launch this project. It's been on my mind for some time, and then I have just been stocking up episodes. Karen is incredible. We dive into the behind the scenes of what she does with TONL. BTS is exactly that, what I just said, behind the scenes. It is not about the K-pop band, though that would be very fun. And if anybody feels like spinning up some budget for a BTS podcast that trails the K-pop band, I would love nothing more. That's not true. There's probably some other things I would love more, but I'm just saying it would be very cool. Anyways, Karen and I talk about a lot. She has a lot of really great quotes. She is a soundbite machine. So if you're listening to this and you like what she has to say, please tweet out your thoughts using hashtag BTS podcast. Feel free to also tag Karen and myself. She is at Karen Okonkwo, KarenOkonkwo. She uses hashtag Karen's Thoughts if you want to look up that for some of her advice. It's really, really great. Look her up, go to her website. She's amazing. Recommend the creative teams in your world use TONL because their work is great. And most importantly, enjoy the episode. Hey, this is Lynae, and this is the first episode of BTS Behind the Scenes podcast. And we have Karen Okonkwo, who is the co-founder of TONL, a serial entrepreneur, and a lovely person. So I'm very excited to have her here today. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. So let's dive right in. You have identified as a serial entrepreneur. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I moved to Seattle in 2012 via corporate America. So I do medical sales. And when I got here, I realized that I didn't have a social group. You know, your social life is handed to you when you're in school. That when you move to a different city and you start to embark into the adult world, you realize that you've got to start from ground zero. So I went to meetup.com and decided to start my own women's group, predominantly to find other African American women. And what started with 4 women turned into, believe now there's about 400 women in the group.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. And if you're familiar with Meetup, you know that you have to put on events. So I would have happy hours, I would have outings, and all the while, women were really excited about the events that one of them pulled me aside and they said, hey, you should turn this into a business. You're really good at event planning. And so 2012, I decided to embark on my very first business called Party with a K, and it's still in existence now, and it's basically event planning, candy buffets, dessert tables, and things like that.
That's so fun.
Yeah. And you know what? From that point, I started to really become an idea machine, is what I tell people. I was in a sorority back in Arizona, and I thought to myself, you know, as much as you can love or hate sorority girls, they are very influential, especially on campus. You see them walking around with their cute shirts and their cute outfits and, you know, their nice hair and makeup. And sometimes I imagine people wonder where they got their stuff. And behind the scenes, I knew as a sorority girl that, you know, all the glitz and glam that you saw wasn't necessarily high end. A lot of these girls were very DIY, were very shop for less but look like more. And I felt like I could create an outlet online for women who are not just sorority women to get those best kept secrets. So reached out to 2 of my sorority sisters. They were on board, and we started the Sorority Secrets in 2013. And from that moment, we just had so much attention. We were doing things with Nordstrom, with Victoria's Secret. We were really a part of that affiliate marketing world where we were making money online. But one thing that became very evident to me was that we did a poor job of showcasing women of different ethnic backgrounds. And even when I tried to find women of different ethnic backgrounds, it was a nightmare. I remember it took me about 5 hours to find, like, I think it was black girl drinking coffee. And it wasn't
in the stock photography world, you mean?
In the stock photography world. So that's what ignited the idea of TONL, which is my latest business venture.
That's so incredible. I'd wondered what your background in event planning and such was.
Yeah.
And that's really amazing. And I will say I had very minimal exposure to sorority life growing up. And my older sister was in one, and it just, like, kind of eluded me. And then recently I went for the first time I committed, which is a big deal to me.
Yeah.
To a friend's bachelorette party. And I was, of the 17 girls, I was the only one not from Atlanta. And I was one of 3 that was not in their sorority.
Oh, wow.
But I was so impressed because, you know, I think when you grow up with that group and you get used to, like, planning certain things for a certain amount of people, it becomes second nature and it's not as stressful.
Right.
And it was the most well-planned group event that I have ever been to in my life.
Know how to plan things, that's for sure.
It was incredible. And, you know, generally I think, and I'm sure maybe it happens with men too, but it can be a little, I'm not really a group person. And one of the reasons is generally that in groups there tends to be someone who, like, ends up being the outcast or who is, like, a bad drunk, you know?
Yeah,
There's
all the labels.
All the ways this can go south that it really causes me stress because I just want everything to go smoothly.
Yeah.
But I think because all these girls, you know, did all of that already in college and have probably all seen, like, the worst of each other and then risen to the occasion and been an incredible friend for another one, that there was really none of that.
Yeah.
And we're all, you know, I say adults in quotes because I don't feel like an adult still at 29. But I was so impressed. And then I went, oh, maybe I'll only do group things with sorority girls because they have it figured out.
We do. We definitely do. You will definitely have a good time with sorority girls.
Yes, and that's like it was just a very different lifestyle. Like, I'm used to, like, just a very different thing with my friends, but it's also that I do things with friends in, like, groups of 3 where it's like, you know, my friend, their boyfriend, and myself, or like just very, Yes. That's incredible. That's so cool. And so then you started TONL, and just for background, I heard about TONL because I think your co-founder, Joshua, is that right?
Yes, Joshua Kissy.
Yes. So I think he was on a podcast that I listened to. I think he was on Pod Save the People, maybe? Yeah. Is that right? Okay, yes. So I heard about TONL through that, and I'd followed Street Etiquette in the past. And then when I looked up TONL and saw that you were here in Seattle, I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is awesome. And so what you guys do is really cool, and I have definitely shared it. I have a newsletter called Ask a Millennial, and I've shared it with people because I have been in the marketing world for a while and worked with creative teams where the constant request to them has been, like, but can we get some other people in here? Like, not just all white ladies smiling, eating salad. And then once I, you know, as an intern, I had access to Getty Images and just different stock photography websites. And it was the constant, it was like all white people or like white people and Asian. Like, that was it. And it's really, and then I realized, like, oh, our team isn't selecting, like, they're not just choosing these. That's all that's there. Like, that's all they have to work with.
Which is baffling.
So that's really incredible. And actually, that's going to have me skip to a question that I was planning on asking further down. But I'm super curious because, you know, the whole theme of this podcast is what goes on behind the scenes of a final product. And this particular final product being TONL. And also yourself, because I think your Karen Thoughts, I think is what it is. Karen Thoughts is incredible.
Thank you.
It was so great. So just like a shameless plug here for Karen's, I would say probably the best advice I've ever seen given from someone that is not like self-serving advice. Like, generally speaking, I see a lot of advice from self-identified like marketing gurus or like founders or whatever. And it's a lot of like flashcard advice that isn't applicable, and it really grinds my gears. So when I saw yours and even the intro video, I was like, oh my goodness, finally, someone being a real human and like sharing information in a way that is not self-serving. This is so great. Your intro video was incredible.
Thank you.
And then I went a step deeper, and Karen has these really awesome worksheets. And at first I was like, So the only worksheets that I've done as an adult have been, are you familiar with Blogilates?
No.
Okay, so my cousin showed me this really great YouTube channel.
Yeah.
It's this girl named Cassie. She has a channel called Blogilates, and it's like really good, quick, like pop Pilates classes on YouTube.
Cool.
And
really cool.
she's great, and she has like calendar worksheets, and those are like the only worksheets as an adult that I've like respected enough to like do.
That's cool.
And it does wonders for your abs. So shout out to Cassie.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And yours were really great because they were like a perfect alignment of all the tools that you need. A lot of times I hear people give the advice of like develop a business plan, but that is such a like wild task for someone that doesn't know what they're doing. That's a moving target that you could spend years just spiraling out of control over a business plan.
Yes.
And Karen's are incredible. It's like resources for everything that you need, from the explanation of what a sole proprietorship is to an LLC, that I highly recommend it. So thank you for sharing those.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So to get to my actual question, obviously with TONL, you guys are in a really interesting situation where to get customers, you have to basically have essentially customers, like the photographers who are supplying the photography.
Yes.
I was really interested because I can imagine for somebody, if somebody was out there thinking, oh, I want to start a company like that or whatever it may be, a huge hurdle would be, okay, but how do we get customers if we don't have this like library of assets and images already? So how did you guys start in that area?
Yeah, so we actually decided that we were going to do TONL in September of 2016, but we did not launch it until August of 2017. So it was nearly a year before we actually pulled the trigger. So behind the scenes, we were actually building up our library. So we wanted to launch with at least a few hundred images to get people going. And then simultaneously, we brought on 2 other photographers who were developing our library as well. Not necessarily when we launched, but maybe like a month or 2 before we launched, they started building the library as well. So we knew that we needed to have something tangible, obviously, not just, hey, sign up and it'll come later.
Totally.
You know, we wanted you to dive deep and get excited and really relate to the imagery first. And then, of course, by us having the imagery out there, we can see what you are interested in. And the cool thing is that we started to get an influx of, hey, would you mind adding this to your library and this and this and this? So now we're not wasting our time. Now we know, okay, this in these first 90 days are what people are saying they want, so we can pivot and have a photographer start to fill the library with these images since they're such in demand.
Interesting. And I don't know if you can share this or not, but are you able to see what people are searching for so that you can see?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Because I imagine there's also a certain amount of people out there searching for things that then don't vocalize it, right? That's like...
Right. They don't tell you, but we're lucky enough to be able to see those analytics.
That is very cool. That's so interesting. And so has that been a pain point at all for you guys in terms of trying to figure out where you should be? Because I imagine there's probably some unforeseen like images that you guys were like, oh yeah, of course that. Like what were some of those moments for you?
Really it was more so that we had access to keywords that weren't pulling up anything. So we realized that we had missed out on a lot of revenue for not having, at least if it wasn't the image, we didn't have the proper search tags.
Oh,
and
interesting.
So that was something where we had to go back and look at our like top 30 searches that return no pictures and go deep into our library to add those in to, of course, increase our opportunity the next go round for the next set of people who are looking for those things.
Right. Yeah. Asset management in terms of that is like one of my least favorite things in the world. And I just, wow, it would have taken me a lot of like deep breaths to go through that.
And it's very manual.
It is.
So what people don't know is that as a startup, you know, there are things that you don't realize, and one of them was the infrastructure of our website. It wasn't as hands-off as we were hoping, and we do have a new version that will, that will be launching here in September, and it will have better search capabilities. It will have, I don't want to give away too much, I guess, but it's going to be more user-friendly and more custom to the user.
This will be going live in September, so if you go ahead if you want to, because I probably won't. I'll be in Europe most of August, and so this is a little behind the scenes on the behind the scenes podcast. Is that as someone who does marketing, especially in social media, I learned very early on that sustainability is huge when you're doing anything and putting out into the world.
Yeah.
And so when we started The Vault with Avery, we recorded, I think, maybe 4 or 5 episodes before ever launching.
Yep.
Because I realized I went to school for photojournalism, and it just, in various rounds of me going, oh, it'll be great, I'll do this every week, and then realizing that committing to doing something every week and editing it and getting it out into the world when you also have a job and, like, you know, might like to have friends and sleep, and things like that, just isn't reasonable. So a little behind the scenes on that for listeners is that I'll record probably 4 to 6 of these and then launch and then scramble to record probably 1 or 2 a week, because someday I won't be able to record for a month and I can feel that day coming. So that's so cool. I love that. And so from there, like, you started off then, you were in medical sales. Are you still doing medical sales?
Yes.
You are?
Yeah,
okay.
Believe it or not, I'm still doing medical sales. But I always tell people that if you want to build your own business, get a business building job. So if you have a job that requires you to be at work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., chances are you're not going to really advance that much on your side business. So get a business where there's flexibility. For me, I make my own schedule with medical sales. I know what my quota is. As long as I'm projecting, you know, toward hitting my quota, or at least am very clear on my opportunities, there really isn't any sort of, you know, micromanaging or hovering. Salespeople are very autonomous. You know, we get out there, we know what we're looking for, and we try our hardest, and if we hit our quota, we do. If we don't, we don't. And so there's a lot of in-between time. And so because of that, I'm able to juggle all of these other things that I'm connected to.
That's incredible. And thank you for sharing that also, because I think, you know, some of my friends who are a little bit more in the public eye have found, whether having founded something or started at any kind of startup or whatever it may be, are really hesitant to be honest with people about, like, driving Uber on the side or having a full-time job or, like, whatever it may be. And I think, I mean, it's becoming more and more socially acceptable as, like, people are more willing to be vulnerable and realizing that, like, we don't all have to do what we saw the entrepreneurs of our day do, which is, like, be super flashy and saying that's all they do, and then eventually we find out that they, like, went broke, right? Like, they're all these, like,
leased everything, filed for bankruptcy.
Totally, like a story we've seen time and time again. And so thank you for just being open about that, because I think it's really healthy for people to realize that, like, the people that they see on the internet doing incredible things. I know you were recognized by Forbes and Adweek just recently, and I'm sure so many others that a lot of people might look at that and be wildly intimidated. And a friend of mine, his name is Trevor, he's really incredible and has done a lot. I've asked him before, like, how do you, like, do all these really incredible things? Like, and we've been friends for almost a decade now, and he has a really incredible company called Brud, and he's DJ'd, and, like, he's done all these amazing things. And he was like, oh, I just break things down into tiny steps. And, like, you know, I've read that before. I've seen other people say that. But then hearing your friends say that, where you have that level of humanity. And you're like, oh, you're a real person. Like, you're not, like, some robot that wakes up at 5 a.m. and runs 10 miles and then, like, eats a power breakfast. And, like,
You know, I call it disciplined life. I teach a lot of people that I mentor that if you're struggling to get your wheels churning, take out a 12-hour day, like, write it down, and set what you're going to do at 9 a.m., what you're going to do at 12 p.m., what you're going to do it at 2 p.m., and just set it out and create that rhythm. And that's when you can fill in those things that you want to get done. And actually, it's very eye-opening, because then you realize the things that really don't need to be a part of your day. So you start to trim the fat, is what I tell them.
That's awesome. Where did you learn that? Like, where did you gain this kind of insight over the years?
I have great mentors who, really have showed me the value of time. Time really is the most expensive currency. And it's through their mentorship that I started to reflect and realize that I was spreading myself thin. I go on record saying that I don't recommend having multiple businesses. At least I don't recommend doing it until you've mastered one. Give your 10,000 hours. So I started to have some health issues that really put me in the corner and made me reflect and ask myself, what is going to yield me the highest quality of life? And so from there I said, okay, I know myself and I know that I struggle being disciplined. Yes, I'm successful, but I promise people that there are moments where I'm not very diligent in my day. And so I just decided to create that. I didn't see it from anyone. I just decided, okay, I know that I am very motivated by alerts on my phone. So not everyone is like that, but I was. And so I just decided to do that for a good 90 days. And now I don't have the alerts. I already know what my day-to-day is now. I've memorized it.
It's become a routine.
Exactly.
It's become just what you do. Yeah, that's incredible. I do something really similar, and it's just with alerts. And and I wonder, did you find that, how did you adjust? Because I know for me, when I was setting an agenda of what I would do, I would say, oh, well, I'll do this in 30 minutes and this in an hour, and then find that, task A actually takes an hour and a half, right? Yeah. And then task B only took 15 minutes. How have you learned to adjust, and kind of what have been, I guess, maybe some of the more pivotal moments in getting that structured?
Well, one of them was realizing that I didn't need to do certain things that I was doing, so I removed them. Like what? So one of them that I haven't mentioned is that I have a cultural wedding show business.
Okay.
And right now we're at a pause period where we're reflecting on if we want to turn this into a profitable business or if it's going to be a passion project. I entered into it wanting it to be a profitable business, but I understand that desires and things can change. And so because there's not a lot of movement there, there's no need for me to allocate that time to it on my calendar. So I removed it. And so that obviously has freed up at least 2 hours of my day that I can use to exercise a little bit longer or to do task C that I was waiting on. Maybe I can do that a little bit earlier and free myself to sleep more. So those are different ways that I've pivoted in my schedule.
That's so awesome. That's really cool. I appreciate you sharing that. It's really interesting to me how different people are motivated in different ways, and how some people, the whole setting the alarm thing is they're allergic to it.
Yes.
They just, and it's, it's so hard for me to understand.
It motivates me for sure.
That's so awesome. What has been the, I guess, on one side, the most humbling in terms of from start to present with TONL, and what's been the most empowering and encouraging?
The humbling is thinking that this would be a turnkey business. And I knew that we would obviously have to put in, our time to get our money. I always think in big business, everything that I develop is that, but I also have to realize that it does take time for that to happen. And so we were supposed to launch on the total eclipse, which I believe was August 21st.
Okay.
Did a whole marketing campaign surrounding it. And then that day came and we realized that we weren't even close.
I'm tense just thinking about it.
So imagine that you developed a whole marketing plan. People are on the edge of their seat waiting, and you reach 5 p.m. and you know that there is no way. No way. And then to add insult to injury, this was the one day where I specifically had to do a lot for medical sales. So I couldn't even help in.
Wow.
So I eventually came home way late at night, and we literally, I passed it on my couch. We would take turns doing things to get the website. So that was very humbling.
Yeah.
That you've got to be a little bit more educated on what the needs are, to launch outside of all of, because I came in on the marketing side of things, so that's all my eyes were really on. I allowed the developers to do what they need to do, and I also do business development, and so I realized fairly quickly, at least a week and a half before we were going to launch, that some things needed to be done. Right. And we thought they would get done. So anyway, lesson learned. As far as what has been the greatest experience, the greatest experience has been the social impact. And if I were to give an example, I will use the Urban Indian Health Institute, They're here in Seattle. Okay. And they represent basically the American Indian and Alaska Native community. And Abigail Echo Hawk is a huge advocate in the community and reached out to us saying that they just did not have imagery that depicted their community well. Wow. And if you think about it, there isn't. If you were to type in natives, you'll probably get Pocahontas. You'll get one, cliche.
You could probably get a lot of plants, to be honest with you. You probably get, native people will go, oh, a native, indigenous plants to the area.
Yeah. And so it really broke our hearts to see that there was no human portrayal modernly of the community. And so we embarked on a total collaboration with the Urban Indian Health Institute through Abigail Echo Hawk, and released 100 images, provided them their own private images as well. And, that was an ability for them to actually see themselves, that we've seen those images do really well on our site.
That's amazing.
So that was a really great moment for us.
That's awesome. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
There's this awesome Instagram called Vanishing Seattle, where they show the different things.
I've heard of it. I think I've seen it once.
Yeah, where it shows just as different pockets of Seattle get gentrified and disappear. And I'm probably not doing it justice in describing it, but Creative Mornings had Cynthia, who started that Instagram account there, and she showed me this incredible site. And I think it's called Pay Rent to the Duwamish, and it's basically because I live in Pioneer Square. Oh yeah. And it's basically and it's so smart. It's I wish that every tribe would do this, because I think it's the coolest, where it's oh, if you feel so bad for being here, pay rent. Yeah. And you can just go on and donate. And so I've gone on a few times and just, shot some money here and there, because that neighborhood used to be, if I'm not mistaken, King Street Station is where there used to be a fishing hole, and it used to be completely, obviously, as the entire country was, native land. And so that's beautiful, because that is something. I have a few friends who are artists who are native here, and it's just been it's been such a learning experience for me to learn. Likewise. Yeah, because it's totally different. And there's just so much that that is on their minds and in their hearts. That's really interesting to be exposed to. And I think we're really lucky to be here in Seattle, because I've seen a much stronger and just more visible Native community here, and more kind of to some degree, level of respect for natives here, that I haven't seen, in my sad little West Coast exposure of just LA, Orange County, San Francisco here. Yes.
So, it's true. Likewise, even growing up in Arizona, I can't really say that I've seen too much homage other than casinos.
Right, which is tough. Yeah, I got really lucky in that my parents are both very, that is they are polar opposites in a lot of ways. They're not together, but that is one area that they both taught me to have a lot of respect for growing up, which I'm really grateful for, because I didn't realize that wasn't most people's experience. Yeah. And so we would go to, my dad and I would go on this trip from where he lives in Anaheim to New Mexico to go visit some friends in Santa Fe, and we would stop at a bunch of different what's the word? Just super special places, and to Native Americans, and he would have me learn the history and And it was just so interesting to me. So that's so beautiful. What an awesome thing to be a part of.
Yeah, it was great.
And is Joshua here, or where is he located?
So Joshua is in New York.
Okay, I thought so.
Yes.
And how has that been coordinating with him? Because he also has his own deal in the same way that you have your businesses and your job.
Yes.
He also has his own deal. And so how has that been?
Yeah, so just like any relationship, whether it's romantic or platonic, communication consistently is key. And so we have weekly meetings, but we are constantly in conversation via Slack. We are friends before we are business partners, and so we've separated it where text messages are personal, Slack is business.
Awesome.
And we have done a great job so far. We've been business partners now for almost 2 years, which is crazy to think.
Yeah.
And we basically travel to each other's cities throughout the year. So I go to New York at least 3 or 4 times, and he comes here about 3 or 4 times.
Awesome.
And any opportunities where it makes sense for both of us to be present, then we'll do that. That actually has only happened once where we've needed to be together.
And what was that for?
We actually did a private talk at REI.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, that was our first speaking engagement.
That's
awesome.
That
was in April. So
that was your first together, correct? Okay,
yes,
yeah. I was like, no, that's not true.
That's not true. We've been doing a lot of, like, divide and conquer situations.
Very
so that was
cool.
our first.
That's so awesome. I love that. That's great. And so with your other businesses, there are some, if I'm not mistaken, where you were the sole founder of it, correct?
Right, which is Party with a K.
Okay. And so how has it been? Like, what are kind of the pros and cons to you in terms of doing it on your own versus partnering with someone?
Yeah, so I actually talk about that in Karen's Thoughts. And what I say is that I prefer to work in settings with other people because there's no substitute for a second pair of eyes, a second person to provide a different angle on things. And so with that said, it also is important to make sure that you're working with the right person. And so I always talk about having the same why. You guys need to enter with the same level of outcome. So if one person is, I want this to be a passion project, and then the other one's like, no, I want this to be a big business, you shouldn't be in business together.
Right.
You know, you're already going down the road of splitting.
Totally. Very different values.
You're gonna butt heads perhaps.
Yeah.
And that is something that happened in one of my previous businesses, which is no longer in existence because 2 of us had one idea of how the business should run, the other had a different one. And you can't have common ground when there's no commonality.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just, some of the ways that I have, or some of the things, that I have considered. I do enjoy having my own business, something to my name.
Yeah.
It is exhilarating. It's nice to know that something is attached to you. And ultimately, if I were to choose, though, I would say I like working with other people.
Yeah, that's really good insight. And you sound a lot like my therapist.
Oh. Hey, I get asked to do a lot of therapy-related stuff.
I can see why. I was like, wow. Are both your parents therapists? This is amazing.
No, they're actually not. So, but they're good people.
That's amazing. And how do you two work on problem solving together, and how do you approach that when you're working with somebody, especially on an area like this is just a very different type of company than your other endeavors, and so I'm really interested how that works.
Yeah, so both Joshua and I are huge communicators, so nothing is going to be reduced to a passive-aggressive text message.
Oh, thank goodness.
It's very...
What a relief.
Literally, it's very much... pick up the phone when something is wrong. And I'll be honest and say that I think there's maybe only been like one time where there's been a very apparent disagreement on something, and it was quickly squashed in a phone call.
And did you two know that you were both really communicative before you went into business together, or was that something that was kind of peeled back?
No,
okay.
I met Joshua through one of my great friends, Mektis Marsha. That's her now fiance. So I
well, congratulations to them.
I experienced him secondhand, through her. So we didn't meet on like random ground. We met through Mectis. So I didn't know him on that friendship level too deeply, but we both just knew that we respected each other. I think that's what it came down to. Is that
Totally.
we respected each other. We saw that each other were making boss moves, and we just wanted to align ourselves.
That's awesome. That's really cool. What did you go to school for? Because I browsed around and I didn't see necessarily a ton of like nods to like that experience, and obviously you were in a sorority, so we know you went to school. What was your major?
Initially went to school to be a doctor. So I was when you're going to school to be a doctor, you actually don't major in like medicine, but what you do is you do pre-med, which is just getting all the science classes. So then the next level is that you should have an actual major. So you can make a biology or chemistry. They say with medicals, for medical school, it looks better for you to kind of look a little unique. So I did family studies and human development.
Very cool.
Because I wanted to be a pediatrician. And then I had an epiphany my junior year and realized I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. And so I pivoted, made family studies and human development a minor, and made my major business communication.
And how did your parents respond to that?
Oh, they called a family meeting.
Oh, I'm sure.
They're Nigerian. Nigerians, if you know anything about Nigerians, you have to be the best. You have to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a comedian joked a disgrace to the family. So
who joked that?
Oh, I forgot who it was, but that was the funniest thing that I've ever heard.
And for those who are listening who don't know this, if I'm not mistaken, Nigerians are in fact the most educated group in all of America.
Oh, really?
Yes. So
I would not be surprised.
Yeah, it was actually, there was a study I think done in Houston where they found out that it was like not just the most educated immigrant group, but and I know that the study was specific to perhaps Houston or the state of Texas, but definitely the most educated group in all of that area.
Right.
And then I heard, I was listening to another podcast, or maybe I was, so one of my best friends is also Nigerian, and you two have the same, or very similar last names, actually.
Oh, okay.
And so we were talking about it, and I think it perhaps either that or it's that study got blown out to a country proportion, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I actually recall that too, so I'll look it up again because I do remember reading that. And I'm not surprised because we are always taught to be the best. And it's not like a thing of pressure, which maybe some do feel pressure. It's just a standard of life. So, Nigerians are the best. That's all I have to say.
You shouldn't get that's you're not wrong.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's so interesting because the way that education is kind of shaken out, especially, I mean, my experience with it growing up was a mixed approach of, like, you should go, and then I always felt like, okay, I should go, and I, in my head, had this idea of me just, like, being amazing in school, and that's not necessarily what happened. But then over time, there was also so much like, oh, but look at this, like, look at Richard Branson, like, he did it without whatever, and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And my mom, I can't remember, I think one of my best friends, her mom was going back to school, and my mom made the point that I went, like, it was an aha moment for me. That's really changed the way I've thought about things, where my mom said, like, well, look, those 4 years are going to pass anyways. So why not just go?
Yeah.
And that's something I approached school in hindsight strategically. At the time, I was just like, I have to pay for this. My parents aren't helping. And you can only get internships when you're a student. So, like, I should just stay in here and get internships.
Yeah.
And truly, I tell people, because I have, cousins that are kind of like, oh, should I go? And what's the point? And da-da-da-da. Because they see so many people who go and then don't get a job.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other conversation.
Right.
But I always tell them, like, look, you should go because those 4 years are going to pass, and I can guarantee you from 18 to 22, no matter how incredible you are, unless you're amazing at, like, science or you're an amazing developer, no one's going to give a shit or take you seriously.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter how smart you are, unless you're a prodigy at a very specific thing, you won't be taken seriously. Right. So do something. Like, and school is not a bad thing to be doing in that time. Yeah. And when you intern, that's also the only time that people are just, like, really happy to help you and give you whatever knowledge you ask because you're not a threat to them. And that to me, and you get to like kind of have the shelter of being an intern. There's not really, you don't have to be scared you're going to get fired. Like you're an intern.
Yeah, I treat school as just an opportunity for access.
Totally.
I sit back and I kind of laugh because I don't remember anything from school. The only thing I remember is all of the networking opportunities and where it was able to afford me where I am now. So I struggled wondering if I was going to tell my kids to go to school. And the only reason why I would is because I actually just want them to gain better access.
Agreed.
In terms of people, not necessarily the knowledge. Of course, there's skill sets that you adapt as well, but I think it's important for you to be at that level to understand that the majority of the world is 95% of the world, embarks on being an employee or a small business owner. So you want to make sure that you understand the mindsets.
That's a really interesting statistic. I've never heard that. Where did you hear that from? That's awesome.
Yeah, actually, one of my mentors, he just talked about, well, maybe you've read it. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, okay. My uncle recommends it all the time.
Yes, Robert Kiyosaki talks about that in Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
How have you found really good mentors?
Wow, well, it all takes place with going to the specific area that you're interested in. So let's just say you're interested in marketing. And the best way for you to find mentors is to go to networking events related to marketing because those are the type of people that you're looking for. And then you have to work the room. You can't just stand and hope that everyone's going to talk to you.
Right.
I do have a trick, though. If you are very introverted, I've said this before at Seattle Business Babes, which is a group here, I said stand by the food because everyone will be by the food, everyone will be by the drinks, and boom, you can spark a conversation there rather than working the room and forcing yourself around. But anyway.
That is a great strategy.
Yeah, literally, you stand by the food.
And here I was targeting people in the bathroom all this time.
Yeah, because then in the bathroom, they're excited to go back to the party.
Totally.
And most people need drinks, unfortunately, to socialize, so why not stand by the drinks and food?
That's really interesting. And then what has your pitch been to them in terms of sparking a mentor relationship?
Really, you just have to be explicit and state your intentions, what you're looking for. Because sometimes people may not be a mentor, but they can give you access. They can be a sponsor. So a sponsor is someone who has access to a specific job or person and can create that relationship for you, or at least that introduction. So they're not necessarily a mentor in your life, but they definitely are helping you catapult you. And so, mentors are people who, it's not just about their skill set, it's about their entire lifestyle. You value them beyond just their skill set. So how you find them is you've got to go out to these networking events.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So I think that's about all. I'm still toying with, I'd never listened to a podcast before. Avery asked me to partner with him on our former podcast, The Vault. And then I started listening, and I haven't been able to stop since. It is sad how little music I listen to now as as someone who's music obsessed and has played music since I was 6 or 7. I constantly am like, what do I do? Do I listen to this or this? And I do love podcasts that have cool little end caps and segments. Like Aisha Tyler does a really great one where she asks people what their self-inflicted wounds are. And then Jesse Thorne has an outshot. And there's many, and I'm still toying with the idea. I'm considering just kind of grabbing one of theirs each time and going this one's inspired by so-and-so, whatever.
Yeah.
But for now, I think I'm going to stick with kind of the theme of the podcast and what is one area or industry or company or more than one that you're really interested in the behind the scenes of and kind of what goes on behind closed doors.
So I'm very interested in how Oprah Winfrey navigates. Oprah Winfrey is my idol. I'm not a fanatical person. I'm not actually a terribly excitable person. I'm a very happy person. I'm very positive, but I'm not excitable.
Same.
But I will say this. If I were to meet Oprah, I would be very emotional because she has impacted my life. So with that said, I would love to just sit down and have tea with her and ask her, how did you go from being this woman who grew up in basically, destitute situation to being a journalist, to being this huge media mogul. What all happened in between that time?
That's a really interesting point, because her juggling and like her prioritizing of time and opportunity cost must be just bonkers.
Yeah.
And like being on her team, that's a good one.
Yeah. So if someone out there can help me meet Oprah, I will take you out to lunch with Oprah.
Right, exactly. In that case, I will work much harder to get you connected with Oprah if there's an extended invitation, because God, I love her.
Yeah.
I used to watch it. It was like other kids were like rushing home for like, you know, maybe to play with their friends, and I was like, it's 3 p.m. Oprah's on. Nobody messed with the television.
That was just everything for me. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
This is fun.
Thanks. Thank you so much for listening to BTS Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation that Karen and I had. I'm so glad she was on the podcast. I had a really, really great time getting to know her and getting to just hear what she had to say. She's so smart, and I'm super excited to see what the future holds for her and TONL. Music on this podcast is by Benjamin Betharum. You can find him on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Betharum. That is spelled Bethurum. I'm super glad to have his music on here. He does really great work. You can check out my newsletter. It's called Ask a Millennial. It is just basically what it sounds like. It is tips surrounding marketing to millennials. It's different creative inspirations. It's a little bit all over the map, but it seems like people like it, and I have a lot of fun doing it. It's some trend forecasting, some sort of reports, and just a general highlight of cool stuff happening on the internet that relates to millennials. I would say that a lot of the subscribers fall in a few buckets. Largely it is marketers, people who manage millennials, or people who are coming out of college and looking for some marketing and creative inspiration that they can quickly apply. So you can subscribe to that at bit.ly/askamillennial. You can also support this podcast by using my Hotel Tonight promo code. Hotel Tonight is great for last-minute hotel bookings. The hotels are super quality and you save money. Use LCook61 on your first booking and you will save money. You can also use my promo code for Soothe. Soothe is a service for in-home massages and it is awesome. I love it so much. So book your first massage with LZLRZ to save. You can book Swedish, sport massages, prenatal, couples massages. I think they do 60 to 90 minutes. It's really great. I've had awesome experiences every time I've booked one. And obviously, who better to host a podcast than somebody relaxed? Thanks again, and please listen to the next episode. I'm having Matt FX on. He's the music supervisor for Broad City, and I think you'll really enjoy it.